Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy.
Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and welcome to Brooklyn Savvy. We are delighted to have as our guest tonight Clarisa Romero. Now, Clarisa is an author and a transformational coach. She's written this book called The Fearless Entrepreneur, and we're going to be speaking about that on today's episode of Brooklyn Savvy. But I would be remiss if I didn't introduce our Savvy panelistas. We have Nomiki Makrilos.
Nice to be here.
Good to see you. PHYLLIS WHITE-THORNE.
Hi.
And DESIREE KINNEY. Thank you, ladies, for joining. So, Clarisa, I wanted to first talk about how did your work in mindfulness inform this Fearless Entrepreneur book that you've just written?
First of all, thank you so much for having me back on your show. It's so exciting. It's been a few years.
Right?
Since our last chat. It's
2016,
crazy.
matter of fact, I think it was. Look at
Absolutely.
that, right?
I was in the beginning of my journey, in fact. And well, I will have to say that mindfulness is basically at the forefront, and it informs everything that I do. It informs all my programming, all my coaching. It's the foundation of everything that I do, because mindfulness is all about awareness. Mindfulness has so many definitions, but at the core is that awareness of our thoughts, awareness of our emotions, awareness of how we make decisions, awareness of how we're living our lives. At the core of everything, it's that awareness.
So to seek that awareness, because I know that our viewers, I just did a repeat of your show recently and got so much feedback from it. And I think it's because we're at this moment of COVID and everybody's at home and we're shifting in our consciousness. Talk about how we develop that awareness.
Talk about COVID. Never mind that we were already heading towards a mental health pandemic. We live in the age of information overload, in the age of distraction, and never mind how we got hit with this pandemic. I think it's been a tough time, but it's also given everyone an opportunity to pause and realize how unresilient we all are unless you cultivate it. Resilience being our capacity to bounce back from change, from adversity. We realized that most people are lacking resilience. So that's why we fall into chaos, into disruption, into not being able to bounce out of things and accept and pivot.
Because what is the tool for mindfulness? What is it that we need to do to get there?
There's a way to practice informally, and then there's a way to practice formally. Informally is through our senses, paying attention to, well, what are we paying attention to? What are we constantly looking at? And what are we constantly paying attention through hearing? But the formal aspect of mindfulness, which is what you're talking about, the meditation, the brain fitness, as I like to call it, that is something that needs to be very structured because we are so distracted. It's not something that we can say, oh, I'm mindful. We have to pay attention to see if we're mindful. And you can only pay attention if you're training your mind to pay attention. Most recently, I did a whole series of brain fitness sessions, and I developed 7 steps because people kept saying, how can I have this cultivation? How can I practice? As simple as it seems, because mindfulness is all about paying attention. And even when you're doing the formal practice where you put a timer, you have to focus on some kind of anchor to bring your attention to the present moment. I have these 7 steps that walk people through what are the steps. Have a designated location. It's all about habits. Behind it, you have to have a habitual practice in order to create new habits. It's the only way that we can cultivate that present moment awareness. Otherwise, we're in distracted mode. All of us. If you're a human on this planet, especially at this time, we get distracted
all the time.
All the time, 90% of the time. It has to be cultivated through that formal practice every day for at least 15 minutes minimum.
And then you said you had 7 steps, though. I don't want to leave the audience lacking. And then I'm going to, what would the 7 steps
and anyone
be?
that's interested can request this. For example, first step, very simple. Schedule a time and a quiet place, but that time needs to be consistent. Let's say I'm going to do this at 7 a.m. Then you need to be consistent that at 7 a.m. that's going to work for you, because that's the only way that you can create a new habit. Have a location, have a set location that this is your mindful spot where you're going to do your practice. Set a timer so you're not constantly looking at the clock, because that will distract you and get you out of the practice. Find a comfortable sitting position where ideally your feet are flat on the floor, you're grounding them, you're grounding into that present moment. Then you sustain that posture, and then you take 3 deep breaths, because as I always teach people, 3 deep breaths sound so simple, but you're turning that smart part of your brain, which is behind our forehead, the one that helps us to be focused, to be in the present moment, that helps us to make smart decisions. It activates that. 3 breaths, inhaling through your nose and out your mouth. And then you select what's going to be your point of focus. You're going to focus on counting your breath. You're going to focus on looking at something. You're going to focus on a sound. And every time that your mind gets distracted, you're going to bring back your attention to that focus. You do the practice. And every time you get distracted, you're bringing your attention back. And you bring your attention back. If you have not practiced this every day, every other second, you're going to find yourself like, oh, whoops. Or sometimes the timer will go off and you'll realize, oh, geez, what was I supposed to be doing? But then the more and more that you practice, it starts making those neural connections.
And I practiced 3 times a day. But Phyllis, you had something you wanted to add.
Yes, I wanted to ask, as we talk about COVID, and this is a good time when a lot of people are resetting and they're rethinking, well, what am I doing? Do I want to continue doing this? You wrote a really good book, The Fearless Entrepreneur. And I read your book, and you talk about thinking and moving within to make those choices for your life and some of the challenges that you might encounter as you do that. Will you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that there are a lot of people that are really thinking, well, do I want to continue? Is there something that I've always wanted to do that I'm not doing now that I can do?
That awareness is at the core of being able to then realize, okay, well, why do I think that it's too late? But that can only come when you've been cultivating that awareness, when you're tuning in to what is it that I'm thinking, what is it that I'm desiring, and what is it I'm thinking of why I can't achieve that. Because that's where the fear, and that's where you start spotting those fear-based thoughts, which are just limited thinking that you're programmed.
Mm-hmm. No, Mickey, you had something.
Yes. So I also read your book, Clarisa. It was amazing. And what I liked about it was that it's very user-friendly. And you had some great acronyms like the bad roommate, getting rid of the bad roommate out of your life. And, you know, the brain hack and all these things that are very catchy. And they really kind of help you remember a lot of the things that could be theoretical, but you really broke it down. But also I wanted to kind of touch on, you said something about pre-COVID and post-COVID. I think a lot of people had a lot of emotional, mental issues going in, or instability. I don't want to give labels and create, you know, but with COVID and the external pressures of society, and then their lifestyle changes, the lack of control, we've seen a blossoming of a lot more. Some people went in a positive direction and looking more internally and having more time to do that. And a lot of people, of course, that didn't make that kind of adjustment had more mental health issues, and you started seeing the different things we've seen with domestic violence, suicide, substance abuse, and whatnot. So I find that your book was really targeted towards that, and I think that COVID kind of brought out a lot of that mindfulness. The only thing I've heard back also from my clientele and working with people, that they found that the doing it alone, you know, as human creatures, change is a struggle. So doing it alone and getting conditioned, even in as simple as it is, breaking it down, was a struggle. And many wanted either like a group coaching kind of session or one-to-one, just to get through the motions of understanding the concept and actualizing it and making it happen, if that the actual process of mindfulness, it wasn't easy for everyone understanding the concept.
Mindfulness, it's a simple concept, but at the same time, it's very, very complex. And because most of us are not mindful, it's also a foreign concept that we have a monkey mind that when you start paying attention, you see how much it jumps from brain cell to brain cell branch. It has to be tamed. When I was doing the brain fitness, I had a couple of attendees that were attending the sessions that later on I found out got into altercations and ended up with legal action being taken. I even know of many stories of folks that were trying to seek help, but it was tough, especially if there was some kind of domestic violence going on in the home. And as much as they were trying, things just escalated and got out of hand. So absolutely.
Yeah, I was wondering too, when it comes to mindfulness and meditation, it's around not having any expectations for what you're supposed to experience, just that you're stilling yourself. And if you have thoughts, just let them float. And don't beat yourself up because you have thoughts, because you're going to have them. I molded into a spiritual practice, which has made it something that I am committed and devoted to. So it has clearly worked for me. And then I'll get to you, Desiree, because I know you have a question. But the fear piece is something that you spend a lot of time talking about in your book. And I wonder if fear since it's such a human emotion, is that something we just learn to manage? And can it coexist with good stuff? I mean, you might be deciding you're gonna go to the right. You're gonna live this authentic life. It's gonna be new. It's gonna be different, and you're a little afraid. But is that a bad thing?
I love that question because fear is such a part of our human experience. It keeps us safe in many regards. The problem is that we carry that in our genetic code, in our makeup, the story of our ancestors. So our brain architecture already is wired with that predisposition where fear, it's so activated, let's say, to keep it in simple terms, right? Then this fast pace of our society, when we multitask, when we're trying to handle so many things that are coming at us, also activates that fear center of the brain. Studies have found that fear center is basically on 99% of the time in modern day humans. When you think about that, and then you hear the studies that say, 95 to 99% of our decisions that we make are based on emotions. So then it makes you think, but wait a minute, emotions do not live in the smart part of the brain. That means that how well informed are my decisions when 99% of them are being made from emotions? When I started cultivating a deeper practice, journaling and realizing my repetitive patterns and why was I feeling that I could not be an entrepreneur? Why did I feel such fear to just go out there and do what I wanted to do? I realized that one of my biggest ahas was that all the trauma that I had dealt before launching as an entrepreneur, let's say, and trying to start a business was being informed, it was being molded, and it was being directed by my emotional brain, because then that's one thing that even traces back to your childhood. So if you had a lot of trauma, which I experienced a lot of death and trauma in my family, now I comprehend that molded me with a predisposition to be protective, to be reluctant to take risks. And so then when I went through my divorce and my dad's death, and then all the other things, losing my house and all the things that happened that we spoke on the other interview, that augmented my fear center. And that was blocking me. It has so many limiting beliefs and so many fears that I've had to
limiting beliefs. Very important. Limiting beliefs. And some folks don't understand what a limiting belief is. Explain that, and then I'm going to let Desiree ask her question.
If you have an accent, they're going to just judge me as stupid, and so I stand no chance. Or I always ended up having jobs where I was like one of the only females and thinking there's no way that I'm going to be taken serious. When I started the journey of an entrepreneur, I had never made 6 figures in any of the jobs. I had gotten a little close, but I had never made 6 figures. I didn't even realize that was a limiting belief I had. It felt so impossible. The first time that I broke that ceiling. I think that was when I realized how much it had blocked me before, because once that happened, it was like I opened up a fountain.
It's like a breakthrough for you, right?
It was
a breakthrough.
Yes.
Desiree, you had a question.
Yes. Well, first, I just want to say congratulations on Fearless Entrepreneur. And I'm a big, big fan of Clarisa. Met her in my women's networking world, and she's blown me away. So I was like, we have to get her on Savvy. So I'm so excited to have you here. And I wanted to I found a quote that made me think of you and the book. And it says, once you become fearless, life becomes limitless. And I really thought about that and digested COVID and how, kind of on the theme of fears and limiting beliefs, how it could make or break an entrepreneur last year going into this year. And I actually have a podcast, and we talked about, okay, well, it can be seen as obstacle or opportunity. There's two doors that you can open. It's your decision which way you're going to go. Are you going to use COVID as an excuse, or are you going to use it as an opportunity to elevate yourself? And as I'm thinking and digesting that and reading your book, I'm thinking, you personally, Clarisa, what have you experienced in terms of fear, specifically in terms of getting your business to the next level that you have, right? With this amazing book launch and all these other wonderful things that you're doing. How are you able to tap into that, those specific fears that you have, overcome it, find that confidence? And what are those fears that you actually had for the viewers that are watching, that are motivated and inspired, but feel stuck? They haven't been able to pivot. They haven't been able to adapt to this new normal because those fears are overshadowing their ability to move to that next stage in their life.
And I think I just want to highlight something that Desiree said, stuck. Many, many people in this moment realize how stuck they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if I could rename my book, it would be In a Rut and Stuck.
Yeah,
Get clarity. Get unstuck. I'll tell you how. But also, Desiree touched on something. I'm going to connect it that, Tony, you asked. Can fear cohabitate with security or feeling fearless? And it certainly can, because fear is never going to go away.
Never.
Never. That's part of, once again, our human experience. It's part of life. And maybe something's fearful for me and not for someone else on the panel. So it's also relative, right? There are some common things that we can all agree are fearful, but there's a lot of things that will make someone get stuck and be fearful of it that will not intimidate somebody else. Fear and being fearless will always live together. The trick is that awareness, going back to the cultivation of that awareness, because when you realize, and it happens to me every day, I realize, oh, why did I say no to that? So do I really not want to do it, or is it fear? I've reached the point where fear and fearlessness live together. I just know how to manage it.
It's also energetic. You're putting out a different energy too.
Yeah.
Phyllis, I think you wanted to ask a question.
No, I was really listening to what you said. And before, when you were talking about all of those messages that you get, I think in our heads, we have that little inner critic that's constantly talking to us. And sometimes it's about managing that voice in our heads. It's about recognizing where we want to go and keeping focused on where. And when we hear that little inner critic, we need to immediately disavow anything that it says.
And what Desiree and Tony mentioned about that authentic voice in that quiet space, when I had to pivot, I thought that I needed to go, I wanted to push a certain direction that I don't think it was what source, universe intended for me. If we try to control and we're not flexible and resilient and be willing to pivot, you might end up doing something that you're not meant to do and you're not supposed to go in that direction. But a lot of people think that the answers to the perfect job, to their dream job, to a perfect life, that it lies outside of them. but you will never find it out there. Trust me. I know. I thought it was out there too. And it wasn't until I started doing that inner work that I started finding my true voice, that I started finding my passion, that I started finding my path. And it will find you because it is all energy. And when you start vibrating that way, when you start vibrating towards the things that are meant for you, they'll just keep coming and they'll guide you to the next step. And then you just in that flow that I think not many people get to experience because they're constantly trying to micromanage their lives and they don't allow things to come to them, or they're paying too much attention to competition. I used to hear that, oh, well, you got no competition. You never know why they say that. Usually I used to think, oh yeah, they tell you that because they want to make you feel good. But it's so true. Right. There could be a million people that are doing like the same thing, and they're not you doing that same thing. They're not you
doing that same thing. I have to say, I could stay on for another half hour, 45 minutes, maybe 6 days. But we're going to
retreat.
Yes, we can retreat because I've met so many fabulous women in this space. That might be something we have to do. But thank you so much, Clarisa. Your book is wonderful. Your insights are wonderful. And I think viewers need to take away from this. It still takes work, though. Yes. Inner work takes work. So understand that, all of you people that watch Brooklyn Savvy. So thank you so much, Clarisa. And please, people, read The Fearless Entrepreneur. Thank you, Brooklyn Savvy panelistas. And we'll see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.